Well, joining me in the studio is socialist and author Grace Blakeley and YouTube commentator Pearl Davis, both, I would imagine, identifying as provocateurs.
Of course.
Let's talk about this first of all. Pearl, I just find the whole personal pronoun thing honestly absurd. My personal pronouns on my Twitter biography are now hot, hotter, hottest. And frankly, if people don't call me those, then they have to be jailed. I go along with that. But I did that to highlight that when I do that and say that, people then accuse me of being ridiculous. I think the whole thing is ridiculous. Why do we need personal pronouns?
We don't need personal pronouns. I don't think it's kind to allow people to live in delusion.
Wait, are you
at the end of the day, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, at the end of the day.
Let her make her point, man. What is going on?
Jesus Christ, man. I mean, yeah, they should have let her finish.
Yeah, she didn't even get to make her point. Like, they've just cut her off. And it's like, when people are saying something, hear them out for what they have to say.
Piers needs to get his shit under control, man.
Yeah,
like,
he does.
Because if we react to a lot of Piers' videos, because the guests he has on and the conversations they're having are genuinely interesting, but they'd be so much better if they had a rule and it's like, if someone's talking, let them make their point and then chime in. And Pearl's voice is already insufferable. I don't want to listen to her voice any more than I need to. At the end of the day.
At the end of the day. At the end of the day. At the end of the day.
I'm like, just let her finish so we don't all have to suffer.
You know, we all know like a man and a woman. Just because you
That was spot on. That was spot on. You're talented. Wow.
Right.
Yeah, but I just can't. I can't watch it now because now I'm gonna laugh every time I hear her talk. Because now I'm hearing you.
Other than
we all know what
language.
a man and a woman is, okay? Just because you dress like a woman, talk like a woman, act like a woman, it does not make you a woman. And I am so tired of us allowing these people to let us live in delusion. It is delusional to think you are the opposite gender, and it is not kind to
I can't
enable
even
that.
go on. I love flying British Airways, right? My preferred airline, a wonderful airline. And there always used to be a lovely posh voice saying, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Britain." And I used to felt soothing, particularly if I came from another country back to Britain. I felt immediately at ease. My captain was there, sounding like he was, from some wonderful Pathy news bulletin, and he referred to us as ladies and gentlemen. That's now been banned. They're not allowed to say ladies and gentlemen because there might be one person on the plane who says, "Whoa, whoa, hang on. I don't identify as a lady or a gentleman." Well, okay, fine, I don't care, but I do. So where's my right to be called a gentleman?
This is one thing that I always think about as well. It's like, I can understand people want to be referred to as their pronouns, etc. However, I don't think it's fair that the rest of us should not be allowed to be referred to as our pronouns. And it's like, if ladies and gentlemen is a thing, why are we all now suffering and have to cut it out? Just because, yeah, there might be some people who aren't that way.
Because at the end of the day, I'm never gonna get that voice out of my head. No, it is nonsense. It's true. If I've ever gotten on British Airways, it is, you get that proper posh James Bond sounding voice. It is. I agree with Piers. It is pretty soothing, especially like obviously we grew up in the UK, so that voice it's gonna be like. It's familiar, right? It's home. That voice makes you feel like you're at home, especially when you're coming back from somewhere where they don't speak English. It's nice to hear that. And then, what do they say now if they don't say ladies and gentlemen? Theys and thems. I don't even know. What would you say? What would they say?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and theys.
Well, they just say good afternoon, people.
Good afternoon, humans.
No, I'd shit myself if they did that on the plane. I bet the aliens have taken over.
Piers,
Grace?
you know how I feel about this. I'm so bored of it all. I'm so bored of the fact that this is the one item that's constantly coming up over and over and over again. And you can completely see why, right? Conservative governments have destroyed our economy. We're in the middle of a massive climate crisis, just after the hottest week ever. I've just come over from Europe. It's extremely hot. And instead of talking about that, we spend hours and hours and hours talking about pronouns, talking about going into bathrooms, talking about, all of this stuff that just doesn't matter.
Yeah, but you see, it doesn't matter. Hang on. But hang on, it doesn't matter to you.
I'm so bored.
It doesn't matter to you,
Piers.
but it does matter to women in sport.
If you're bored of it, why are you on the show? I'm sure they briefed you before you came on.
But this is the thing. If it's boring as well, then why does it get made into a big issue if people say ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, well, no, what she's
saying if it's not
is,
important. She's saying it's not important, though.
it is very important because you're distorting reality. Where we can talk about those other issues, because the Tory government has done a lot of shit things over here, and that needs to be spoken about. And we can talk about the climate. I don't really have a foot in that race because I don't really understand what's going on, but we can talk about it. Why can't we also talk about this? You're distorting reality, okay?
But it's
Sabi's
only
not,
important when it's relevant to them.
Of course, but the thing is that when you're going to attack reality and what we understand to be the truth, and you're going to try and change the way people think, that is very important. Men are not women and women are not men. 2 + 2 is not 7 and giraffes are not dogs. You can't just throw things to the wind and have people go, hold on a minute, that doesn't make any sense, and then go, oh, it's boring, it doesn't matter.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day,
You cut me, I was going to say it.
It does matter to women whose young daughters might be using these dressing rooms. It does matter to the victims of male rapists who see their attackers identify as women to get into women's prisons. Sorry, so when you say they don't matter, they really do
Let's
matter.
have those issues aired in the appropriate, spaces.
We are.
In sport, have that discussion amongst sports people. But literally, it's about priorities, isn't it? There is a certain number of time that we have on these shows to discuss the issues that matter.
You don't think women's... Hang on, before we come to our next...
I don't think women's sport matters as much as climate change.
I
think
does women's
having a
equality
planet
matter?
in which we can play sport matters more than the rules
Does women's
of sport.
equality matter?
I know that makes me probably absolutely
Does women's
insane.
equality matter to you?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, but actually,
Okay.
the whole point that I was going to make on this segment actually is that you cannot separate feminism from class issues. If you're just going around saying I don't know, I think the female CEO of a weapons manufacturer should be paid the same as a male CEO, and that's the hill I'm going to die on. I'm not fighting that fight with you because ultimately, what I care about are the struggles that ordinary women face every day.
Well, let's come to the...
What I don't understand is she's saying that there's more important things to be talking about, but there are people that are well versed in climate and how the climate works. Mm-hmm. This situation is things that ordinary people can talk about and digest. We're not scientists. We don't really understand this whole climate argument. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like a lot of people do when they even the just... what are they called? Just Stop Oil, those wastemans. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like they know what they're talking about because they don't know what they're talking about either. But with this, with man and woman, male and female, this is something everyone can chime in because this is something we can all observe in real time. We understand what a man is and we understand what a woman is. So actually, Piers Morgan's show is in a very appropriate place to speak about it because he has over 1 million subscribers. He's on TV. He can reach people. Common sense can hopefully win the day. Piers Morgan probably doesn't really have a foot in the climate discussion. He just goes after the Just Stop Oil protests because they're dummies and they're easy to go after. But this is something that we can all talk about. Women can talk about this. Women in sports can talk about it, and women that are not in sports can talk about it, and men can talk about it as well because we understand the strengths that we have over women.
But it's also a cop-out. They're there to have a discussion, and instead of actually raising any valid points, she's just saying it's not important. There's more important things in the world.
Yeah, it's not important to you. But it's everything to a girl that's been training her arse off.
Why is she there to even on the panel?
Yeah, it's everything to a girl that's been training her arse off to get that scholarship, to go to university, to compete on a team, to be snubbed by somebody that's been a woman for 5 minutes. How can you not see that as an issue? And then if you're saying it doesn't matter and we just do it willingly, guess what? Men are gonna win everything.
And
your girls, they ain't gonna win shit ever.
And there's a lot of corrupt people in the world, and if people know that they've got an easy way of winning something by just identifying as the opposite gender, then they're gonna take that opportunity and run with it.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
How are you gonna be able to distinguish whether it's genuine or not?
And the thing is that there are people that are taking advantage of it. We saw that horrific case of Barbie Kardashian, right? You don't know what I'm talking about. Go on our page, look up Barbie Kardashian, the video that we covered. That is somebody that is basically been pulled out of a horror film who has put 2 and 2 together and gone, well, they're going to put me in prison. I might as well identify as a woman. And what did the dummies do? They accepted that. And this person, this man, is going to go to a female prison, someone that has committed atrocities against women, genuinely dangerous to everybody around them is in a female prison.
A lot of men will take that opportunity if they know that that's what they can do.
And the argument that, oh, it's not all trans people. Of course it's not all trans people. But the problem is that bad people exist in all pockets of society, and it only takes one bad person to do untold amounts of damage to multiple people. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's not just one bad person. It's not just one bad trans people. There's going to be a decent number like there is in all. Like, all black people are not thieves. All Mexicans are not rapists. But there's going to be a decent number of those people where if there's not checks and balances and things in place, that they'll do that. And then harmful stereotypes, as I like to say, will get perpetuated. Stop pretending like people can't use this to their advantage. We've already seen Leah Thomas do it. Leah Thomas took first place when they had no business being there. They should have been competing with the sex that they were born as. Instead, they put them in the female one, and Leah Thomas ended up winning the whole thing by a stretch against athletes that were way more talented and way more hardworking than themselves. And they didn't do anything about it. And if you speak up about it, then you're a bigot. And if you use incorrect pronouns on YouTube, because if you guys haven't realized, now I'm trying to word this in a very specific way because it's seen as a hate crime or some shit on YouTube now, which is insane. If you force people to speak a certain way, over time...
How's Piers allowed to say all this stuff then?
Because he's on Talk TV.
Yeah, but he's still being posted on YouTube.
Yeah, but I think it's different when it's TV networks, and I'm not entirely sure the ins and outs of it, but we're not a channel with 1 million subscribers. We can disappear like that. So we have to be careful with how we talk. But I've made it very clear of my stance on pronouns. I don't use preferred pronouns. And if it's harmful to the person, whatever that means, I just use their name. That's the easiest thing to do. If I can't use their name, then we can't talk.
Main point of the segment, which is this issue of women's rights to be paid the same as men in sport. Now, the Australian women's football team have criticised the pay gap in the upcoming World Cup prize money. Let's take a look at what they said as a team.
736 footballers have the honour of representing their country on the world's biggest stage, this tournament.
Yet many are still denied the basic right to organise and collectively bargain.
Collective bargaining has allowed us to ensure we now get the same conditions as the Socceroos, with one exception. FIFA will still only offer women 1/4 as much prize money as men for the same achievement.
Well, OK, this is an interesting, Pearl, because if you look at the revenue, for example, in 2019, FIFA generated £586 million in total revenue. The men's, for the 2019-22 cycle, 5.8 billion. Record revenue through the Men's World Cup. So the women's game has come on in leaps and bounds. The English Lionesses, fantastic win, sell-out crowds. They're making a lot more money. They're definitely way, way further now towards where the men are commercially than they were, but they're still a way off. Mm-hmm. And when you saw at Wimbledon, for example, the men's final was watched by 3 times as many people, and yet they were both free to air on the BBC. You could watch both if you wanted to. So there was 3 times as much interest in the men's game. They played 2 sets more per match than the women do, and yet the women get equal pay. I'm not quite sure why. I don't think it's a matter of equality. It's just a matter of fairness, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I won. I think all of the women should thank the men for funding our leagues, because most of our leagues would not exist without the men, number one. Number two, when we have the same numbers, then we should get the same pay. I'm sorry, I play volleyball at the highest level, and it's like, when we make what the men make and get the crowds that the men draw, then we should get paid the same.
Well, see, why is it actually a fight for equality, Grace? I mean, why, if women in a particular sport, for example, turned out to generate more revenue, right, because they were more watchable, and in America, the women's football team is better than the men, and they do generate, even at school level, far more interest from girls than boys, for example, I don't see why equality should be the aim. Why shouldn't they get paid more than the men?
Well, look, I mean, there are all sorts of problems with the way that this market for labour, and it is basically a market for labour, works. Like, I personally don't think that the top football players in the world should be paid as much as they do. I think it's ridiculous, the amount.
But that's market force.
Exactly. It's market forces.
Well, why shouldn't they get that?
Should that be the way that we decide, you know, who generates what? Personally, I'm very much in favour of the fact that they came out there and said collective bargaining. Ultimately, like, The average worker in this country hasn't had a pay rise in over a decade. How
so
is that going to change? That's going to change when they organise with one another.
I am so tired of women whining.
Mate,
it's
the only person whining at the moment is you.
Literally, the men fund our leagues, and we will still whine that we don't get paid enough. And honestly, when athletes do shit like this, it makes all of us look bad.
I do think that the whole let's get paid equal thing is really stupid when it comes to sports, because anytime... let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. You watch basketball. Mm-hmm. Do you watch the WNBA?
No.
Have you ever turned it on?
No.
Do you know any women that watch it?
No.
I don't know any women that watch it either. All the girls that I know that watch basketball watch the men's league. And that's the same for everything else. Most girls that I know watch men's sports. As a matter of fact, even the girls that I know that watch the UFC, they end up watching they will skip over the women. It'll be the dudes sitting there watching it. The reason that men are paid more is because more people watch them. They push more merchandise. The viewership is much higher on these networks, and people are willing to go and pay for tickets in the stadiums for these games. It's not the same. Now, when you look at women I use UFC as an example because there's women in the UFC that have reached the top level, like Ronda Rousey, for example, or Amanda Nunes, and they are paid for that. I don't think Amanda Nunes quite on the same level as Ronda Rousey, but she was a household name. And I understand it's harder for women to get there because men are physically, we have advantages over women. So obviously you're going to want to watch the people that are going to, exert much more physical prowess or whatever they're doing. So I understand that women are going to have a harder time, but you also have to understand that this is not the doing of men. Women are also tuning in to watch the men compete. When the Women's World Cup is on versus the Men's World Cup, the jump in viewership to the men's is insane. And that is not solely because of men. That is equally because of women. So this whole, they should be paid equal. Like Piers said, if it was the flip side and everybody's watching the women, do you think the men should be paid more? And why? Why would they? No one cares.
It's you're going to be able to pay out more if you're generating more money as well. Like if something's not bringing in a lot of money, how are you supposed to fork out big money for wages when you're not earning that much? Like if you had a sweet shop and you wasn't selling that much stuff, you can't pay the staff members more money just because they're working in like whatever, I don't know. But if the money's not coming in, how are you giving it out?
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you generate more money, you get more money. That's just how it works. And in sports, men generate more money. They're more of an attraction. There's been times where women have reached the top. For example, I even used the WWE as an example. Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, I believe it was, they were the first female main event of WrestleMania, which is a massive, massive deal because WrestleMania is the pinnacle of all wrestling shows. I believe it was Becky versus... it was Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, and Charlotte Flair in a triple threat match for both titles. That closed the show. That's unheard of for women in wrestling. Unheard of, but they deserved it. And I sat up waiting to watch that match because they had gotten to the point where I was like, these women deserve this spot. I'm not going to sit there and watch. And there's plenty of women's matches that come on WWE and they're piss break matches. And I feel no type of way about it. There's a couple guys that come on the show and I'm like, I'm not watching this, is a waste of my time. Like, for example, in the WWE, big attractions are like Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Cody Rhodes. They should be paid more than the women if the women are not as big attractions as them, and it should be the same the other way around. If Becky Lynch is drawing in more people, she should be paid more. That's just how it is. And in sports, men draw in more people. And they probably always will. Because it's just more exciting to watch somebody that is more physically able to do things. Women can't do the things that men can do. If they can, they can't do it to the same capacity. You'll never see someone being able to display the same level of aggression and violence as Brock Lesnar coming from a woman. They just wouldn't, because the guy's built like a tank. He's literally built to fight. You're not going to get that from women. Not to say you don't get good women's fights. When I watched Rose Namajunas versus Zhang Weiliang, that match was absolutely insane. One of the best UFC fights I've ever seen. But that is a serious outlier. If you haven't seen that fight, it's absolutely incredible. I've never seen two women beat the shit out of each other like that in my life. One of their heads was like out here. It was hard to look at.
I can't watch stuff like that. I'll actually pass out. And, when you showed me that Eddie Guerrero video where he got hit over the head with the chair?
Yeah.
and it was all blood. Yeah. I can't lie, it made me feel sick. I was gonna faint.
Do you know what made me feel sick about that? It wasn't so much the blood, it was the sound of his head and the chair connecting.
It was just him lying there and it dripping and just him just looking distorted. Nah.
Yeah, that was mad. That was a mad chair shot.
Because instead of being thankful for the league that we have, we go out and whine and complain about the pay.
I mean, as I said, I'm not whining. You sound like you're maybe doing a bit of whining. But like personally, I don't think we should be whining. I think people should be organising. If you want a pay increase, join a union, get out there and fight for it. That's my view.
Should the women footballers get the same as the men?
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense.
Even if they're not making anything like the revenue?
Ultimately, like, it's not going to change. It's not going to change unless they organise. That's actually true across every sector of the economy. If you want a pay rise, join a union and fight for one.
Let me ask you this, though. They have got unions.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. On talent alone, for example, as a yardstick, the US women's football team were beaten by a group of under-15 boys from Texas, right? Who were very good, under-15 boys, but their under-15 boys team beat them, I think, about 8-9-0 or something. So why should women footballers, who are clearly nowhere near as good as their male counterparts, just technically, why should they get paid anything like as much money?
Well, I mean, you know, it sucks, doesn't it, that, like, as a woman, okay, you play volleyball. I'm a surfer. I absolutely love surfing. It's very hard for women to build up a body strength. This is something that I've learned very much the hard way. And so,
surfers, by the way, there is equal pay.
Yeah, there is. And actually, you know, it's one of those sports where...
Can a woman be as good as a man or not?
Well, it's different. It's a different sport, really. It's not, you know, it is the same sport, but it's very different watching a woman surf than it is watching a man surf because, you know, the average male body is different from the average woman, woman's body for all these...
But is there any actual technical reason why a woman can't do with a surfboard what a man can do?
Yeah, there's loads of reasons. Like, it is about the upper body strength. It's about, like, the way that the body is built.
So should women surfers at the elite level get the same as men?
But, like, again, I think it just is different. Like, it's a different kind of game and people watch it.
You're shaking your head.
No, I just think when we start making the same amount of money as the men, then we should get paid the same as the men. I don't hear the men whining about OnlyFans models getting paid more than them. I don't hear the men whining about models getting paid more than them. Kendall Jenner is the highest paid supermodel. Where are the male supermodels? But whenever men dominate in an industry, women will just complain.
They don't always complain. I mean, I understand this complaint coming from sports. It's ridiculous because if you don't make more, then you don't get paid more. I don't really understand. I mean, she was talking about unions earlier, but exactly what are you unionizing over? If you create a union to fight for equal pay, where do you think the money's coming from? Did you know that the WNBA is only kept running because of the NBA? The NBA makes so much money and the WNBA doesn't make enough money that they use the money that the men generate to keep the WNBA afloat.
But WNBA, I think, is one of the more popular sports for women. Like, people do actually watch it. And I think when it comes down to, like, certain times in football, women's football will be watched a lot more, maybe when it's like World Cup and things like that.
If you had the men's World Cup run at the same time as the women's one,
no, everyone's watching the men's. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just saying there is times where these things do get paid attention to a fair amount compared to other sports.
Look at what you just said, right? WNBA is one of the more popular ones, and they're still unable to keep it afloat without the men.
Exactly.
Which should tell you everything you need to know. I mean, imagine it was the other way around, and the men couldn't stay afloat without the women. So the men were taking money from the women's pockets to keep their league open. What do you think people would say to that, specifically feminists? Like, oh, we earned this, blah, blah, blah. Well, you only exist because of the men. And I'm willing to bet, even though I don't know this, I'm guessing, I'm willing to bet that probably happens in other sports as well. It would make sense. If you're not generating enough money, then I imagine in boxing, in cage fighting, in football, in, I don't know, motorsport, the guys are going to be the foundation because people are tuning in to watch them, and it allows women to come in and enjoy that opportunity because the foundation's there. You know, you can in motorsport, maybe for example, if it was all women, but then maybe motorsport's different because if you're fast on the bike or the car, you're fast on the bike or the car. But then I understand that training for motorsport is also very difficult because of the G forces, and they can cause you can fuck up all your shit if you don't train for those properly. So again, the advantages that men have over women will afford us those sort of things where we get paid more. It just is what it is, man. As far as I'm concerned, if women excel in a sport that men don't, men should not piggyback off of those women. Those women should be paid exactly what they're owed. And the same is true on the other side. You can't unionize for the pay of another gender. Your gender's just not bringing it in. And yeah, the women's football team lost to 15-year-old boys. 15-year-old boys who are probably not very organized. They probably are good at football, but they're 15. This is playground football.
That's crazy. But football's not big in America. He did say the US female soccer team, like...
Yeah, they're meant to be better, and they still lost.
No, but like soccer is not as... Like, football is not as big in America as it is over here.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, if you took them American 15-year-old boys and put them against, the UK female football team, I reckon the UK football team would hold a good game, not 9-0.
You think the UK 15-year-old boys would hold a good game against who?
No. The female UK footballers against the American 15-year-old footballers. I think the British girls would hold a good game against the 15-year-old American boys, because it's sort of like bigger over here. It's like if you took British female basketball players and put them against 15-year-old male American basketball players, they'd probably smash them because basketball's bigger in America.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
but
it's
like,
probably a dead point, but...
No, I understand
I
what
don't
you're
think the UK team would get thrashed 9-0.
I don't know enough about what you're saying specifically. I wouldn't take that a bet personally. I would still bet on the boys, probably thrashing them pretty hard.
I mean, I don't know if that's true about OnlyFans, because there are a lot of men on OnlyFans as well. But I mean, look, the main point
You
here...
think they make the same?
I have no idea, but like maybe
Well,
if
then
you
why are
averaged
you-
out the number of men and women that are on that website. Anyway, look, the main point here, the point that I came on here that I wanted to make was that the problem that we have in our economy at the moment is not that like the average football player isn't paid the same as the average man. It is probably an injustice, and I'm glad that they're organising and working together to fight for that. But ultimately, the problem we have in our economy is that nobody's getting paid enough money because inflation's eroded people's wages. Even before that, no one had a pay rise in a really long time. And the lesson from this is, as I've said, I'm going to say it again because it's an important lesson and no one knows about them anymore because they see them as a hangover from the 1970s. Join a union, because otherwise your boss is going to walk
but there
away
are
with you.
unions for all these. It's the unions that are fighting for them.
Exactly.
But just as a general point, though, the principle you think that women should get paid the same, even if they're not as technically as good and not producing as much revenue.
It's a subjective judgment, isn't it, on whether or not they're like technically as good?
Well, not really.
No, it's not.
Because people watch men and women's sports for different reasons.
Well, let me give an example. An example would be the Olympics. If you made it non-gender specific, how many women would win medals?
Well, I mean...
None.
Okay.
Maybe in equestrian and maybe in shooting, I think, are the
But
two.
again, I think...
Where there's no sense that the men might win.
You can say, like, oh, you know, this group is better than this group. But again, I think it's different.
Men are better than women at
watch...
sports. Yes, let's not live in this delusion.
And in
I played
most
16
cases,
years
and in most cases,
This is pretty ridiculous. It's kind of insane that Pearl is like having to school this woman. This is one of those things where we don't even need to argue over it. Men are better than women at sports.
Yeah.
They're better technically, and just physically we're going to be able to do more. There's no debate about that.
Yeah.
And yes, there are women that are outliers, but they are outliers.
But these are the same sorts of women that would probably say, if we were to look at hard labor jobs, oh, I can't be a tree surgeon because I haven't got the same strength as a man. Okay, so why is that different? And you don't want to be a tree surgeon, but you can't accept the fact that a man, because of things like physical strength and things, naturally will be better in sport.
What's a tree surgeon?
Someone who cuts down trees.
Oh, I thought that was like a fancy term for something in...
No, just someone who cuts down trees.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
A lumberjack.
If that's what you want to call it.
Yeah. I see your point. It's just weird to me that she's bringing up unions.
But my point is that they will pick and choose, these feminists.
The thing with unions is that I'm not against them because some places do underpay their staff. But unions work in places like contact centers or restaurants or, corporate settings. in sports, people make money off of what they're able to bring in. This is like a sales team who makes money exclusively on sales, and you got one guy that's absolutely smashing it, and then you got a bunch of girls who can't get the sales, and they're like, we need to unionize. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you unionize over this? You would only need a union if the girls were bringing in equal numbers to the men and still getting paid less. Then we've got a problem. But that's not what's happening. You can't just take other people's money. And this is one of those areas where it's probably never really going to change. Men are always going to dominate in sports. It's just somewhere where men excel because of we're physically gifted over women. That's not a put down on women. It just is what it is. If you don't believe me, then the day that they dissolve the gendered sports and they just let men and women compete together, you're probably never going to see a woman on the podium again. You just won't. Just think about what Leah Thomas did. Ranked 500th in the men. Number 1 amongst women. Zubi, a UK rapper, broke the Guinness World Record for powerlifting. There's endless examples of men just outclassing women. And even when they're not as skillful, they'll still probably win. It's not even a harsh reality. It is just reality. Just accept it. Just accept it. And you know what? It's not like women can't climb to the top of their sports. I've brought up UFC multiple times. I've seen multiple women climb to the top there. And it's happened not to the same level, but I've seen boxing where, like Katie Taylor, for example, I'll watch her matches because she deserves my time. But I'm sorry, a lot of the times when I tune into women's sports, I'm just... So why would I not be watching the dudes? Pause.
Grace, more people, men and women, want to watch men play sport.
Correct.
That's just a demonstrable fact. That may change. And my point is, if it changes, I don't see why equality should be the only ambition for the women. If it turns out that in some sport women get more viewers watching and therefore draw more revenue, I'm all for them getting more money than the men.
Can you name 5 WNBA players? 5 female soccer players?
I mean, I can't name any soccer players
That's
already.
crazy. I
What
wish we
is
had the support
WNBA?
from the
basketball?
feminists.
I don't
we
know.
would get equal pay if we would just get the support from the feminists.
Well, let me tell you.
Name 5.
Let me tell you.
I don't even know what the WNBA is.
We need our support.
You're asking the wrong person.
Yeah,
I think.
you really are.
But I do want to mention one thing, which is I had Dale Vince on the programme. He's been funding Just Stop Oil, and also he was very, very keen to show his feminist credentials because he owns a football team, and he had just hired the first female manager of a football team. But there was a slight problem, which he only made her the caretaker, and I saw a potential flaw here. So let's see what went down when I interviewed him. You didn't think by appointing the first female caretaker manager of a professional men's team you would get any attention?
She's the best candidate for the job at the club. This is what happens. You look at within the club, you find your best coach and you say, take the team in an interim period while we do a proper recruitment process. That's all that's happening here. Why do you keep coming back to that?
Because she's only a caretaker.
Our record of appointments.
She's only a caretaker.
Look at our record of appointments.
So if you believed in her that much, you'd have made her manager. You've got all the publicity, but actually she's not got the full
That's
job.
Not how it works.
And I suspect what's going to happen is you're going to go and find...
understood football.
You're going to probably go and find a bloke to replace her, and then you're going to have to deal with that.
I thought you understood football, Piers.
I do. I'm an Arsenal fan.
Did.
Well, you might be massively unsurprised to learn that 12 days later, Hannah Dinkley has been removed from her job as caretaker manager and replaced by a man. Yeah, Dale talked a good game on feminism and women's rights and boasted about it and got all the publicity. And in the end, he got rid of her after 12 days and put a bloke in charge. And you can make your own view about Mr. Vince for doing that. Lovely to see you both. Thank you both very much indeed.
Piers is so petty. I know he hates that guy. But, you know, like this conversation about women's pay in sports is really one of the most stupid ones. And oftentimes the people that are complaining don't realize that if their gender actually supported watching them, this wouldn't be a problem. But the fact of the matter is that women don't want to watch it either. Now, it has been growing over time. The viewership's definitely been going up, but it's just nowhere near the men. So why should they be paid more? And if the day comes where women are getting more views than men in sports, then the women should be paid more. And if I hear men complain about that, I'm going to say you're bitch made. You're not getting as many views. Why should you be paid more? This is like male corn stars lobbying and unionizing to get paid more than the women. We all know that most of the time when people are looking up corn, they're looking up women, right? Even other women are looking at women. Most of the girls that I know that watch corn, they'll name female corn stars. They won't name any men. I mean, recently, obviously everyone knows Jason Love now because of what's happened. But outside of that, people don't. It would be ridiculous for male corn stars.
I couldn't name you one female porn star except for Mia Khalifa because of the whole big controversy. Yeah, but that's only because of the controversy. Not because I've ever gone and looked at Mia Khalifa like.
No, but I'm saying when people go to corn sites, who are the most popular people on there? It's women.
It's Jason Love.
Well, now it's Jason Love. But outside of that, it's been women. It would be ridiculous if male adult stars were lobbying to be paid the same as women. We would all sit there and go, are you stupid? We understand what drives the market. And I think all the feminists and all the people that make these arguments would also be like, why would you get paid more? You're not the star of the show. And the guys know that. They understand that. Have you ever seen them kicking up a fuss? And we know that female adult stars get paid way more than men. It's not even close. And I've watched documentaries on some of the horror stories of that industry from the male perspective and how worn out they can get about things. I don't really ever see them complaining though. This is just the job. Women dominate this field. And it is what it is. I will never support male adult stars lobbying and unionizing to get paid more than their female counterparts. They ain't the star of the show, and that's not why people are tuning in. All the most popular categories on there are to do with women. MILF, stepsister, whatever else there is on there. It's all to do with women. You rarely get it about men. If it is about men, it's probably gay sex, funded by the gay community. You can take that talking point, maybe throw it under the bus if you want, but that is an area where women dominate. I don't know what other areas they really dominate in. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but if there is one, I don't know why men would get paid equally. Maybe just pull your finger out your ass, understand what it is, and over time, if women are getting to the same level of men in terms of entertainment and people are tuning in, then yeah, they should be paid the same. Until then, just hold this L. Anything you want to say to your ladies?
At the end of the day...
Her voice is just something else. It's when she flaps her hands as well. At the end of the day.
At the end of the day. At the end of the day. At the end of the day.
I talk too much. Someone commented and said, I don't believe that you guys actually film at midnight. Can you just show that it's midnight right now? Wait, I got it on my phone. It's literally midnight, 1 minute past.